Okay, right, I'm going to get started just because we've got lots to get through. Welcome everyone to the second training in the mentoring training scheme, Mentee on project management. I'm Hannah. I think I met lots of you the other week, but just in case I'm a new face, I'm Hannah. I'm the Senior Projects Officer at Beacon, and I am leading the mentoring program. So you'll be seeing a lot of me over the course of the next few months, next year, I guess. But anyways, welcome. So today's training is going to be led by Costello Medical, by Olivia Edwards, and it's on project management. So a really quick intro to Beacon. If you were here for the first training, you would have already heard this, so I'll keep it really short. And there will be a longer introduction to Beacon and to the program itself on the welcome event on the 30th of March. But basically, Beacon, we're a UK-based rare disease charity. We have a vision of no rare journey alone and a mission of building a united rare disease patient group with rare disease community with patient groups at its heart. So our work focuses around three main areas. Our main focus is patient group training. We help groups meet their rare challenges by supporting them to form, grow, and professionalize. Another focus is rare research. We help patient groups find a place at the heart of research so that they can ensure better outcomes and improve access. We also strive to create a rare disease community by facilitating connections and collaboration. So like I said, sorry, slides freaking out there. Like I said, very brief intro, but now I'm really happy to introduce Olivia Edwards from Costello Medical, who's going to be leading this session on project management.
Okay, let's get started then. So yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm Olivia Edwards. I work for Costello Medical, and I guess today will just be kind of a introduction to project management and what that entails. And Costello Medical and Beacon have partnered for a number of years. And I guess why am I qualified to talk to you today? I work for Costello Medical, as I've already said, and I'm an account support manager at Costello Medical, and we are kind of a pharmaceutical consultancy company and work in medical communications. And during my time at Costello, I've had to kind of project manage a number of different projects. So hopefully have some experience that I can share with you guys today around how to kind of tackle project management. Some kind of objectives that we're looking to cover today is quite simply to kind of familiarise yourself with the concept of project management and the components that are associated with that. And that will also include kind of the overall project life cycle and what that looks like. And then we're also going to be kind of exploring different tools and techniques that you guys can use in order to effectively project manage and deliver what you're looking to achieve within your patient group. And then also thinking about what the challenges and potential roadblocks that you guys might face and how we can tackle these during project delivery. Moving on, I've just kind of put a brief agenda together for today. And yeah, as I've said, we'll kind of be covering the basics of project management and then breaking that a little bit more down into what is project planning. It's obviously a fundamental part to delivering any project, as well as communication and having a think about how effective communication can allow you guys to achieve the goals and objectives that you're setting out to achieve. We really want the session today to be as interactive as possible. So we're going to have a few breakout rooms and some case studies for everyone to discuss. And then also, as I've already alluded to, think about the challenges as well and a case study around that. And then as with any projects, there's also the completion side of things. So we're just going to have a brief discussion about that. And then if we've got time, there'll be an opportunity to kind of ask any questions. And then Hannah will come back at the end to kind of close the session. A few housekeeping points before we get fully started. Please do keep your cameras turned on. I hate kind of talking to a blank screen of initials and names, so if you can turn your camera on, that would be great to be able to see some faces And also, if you're not speaking, please do keep your microphones on mute so that we're not, oh, I can see a few people turning their cameras on. Thanks, guys. Yeah, if you can keep your microphones on mute if you're not talking, just so that we don't get interrupted by any unexpected noises. Also, please do raise your hands if you've got any questions during the session. Equally, please familiarise yourself with the chat functionality because we'll be checking the chat just to see if you guys have any questions as we go through. I'm just going to try and make sure that I can see the chat function. Where's that? I think, here we go. Yes. Great, I can see the chat, so please do pop everything in there if you've got any questions as we're going through and you don't want to interrupt by coming off of mute. We will, as I've said, we will be having these breakout sessions where you'll be put into kind of groups of 4 or 5, depending on attendance today, and then you'll have a chance to discuss with each other. So please do kind of come off mute and have some productive discussions during those breakout sessions. Please note that this is being recorded, just so you're aware, and also there is live captioning available if you require it. Any questions on housekeeping? Are we all good? Great, thanks for the thumbs up. So I think I've kind of introduced Costello Medical already, but we kind of support in the scientific analysis, interpretation and communication of clinical and health economic data. And we do quite a lot of pro bono work with charities like Beacon in supporting them to kind of achieve their goals and objectives and provide them with the support that we do any of our commercial clients. So really excited to be here today and kind of talk you through project management. So moving on to the basics. So we're going to go straight in and think about like what comes to mind when you think of project management. So it'd be great if people could post in the chat or come off mute and yeah, just give your initial impressions of what comes to mind for you when you think about project management. Yeah, and creating a framework with an end-to-end goal in mind and then executing to deliver the outcome. That's great. And definitely team building along the way. If you're delivering a project and with a team, and hopefully you're going to bring that team closer together. Great. Thanks, guys. So quite simply, and from the Project Management Institute, who are hopefully qualified to speak to a definition, it's the use of a specific knowledge, skills, tools and techniques to deliver something of value to people. I think it's really important to remember that if you're delivering a project, you want to make sure that has the maximum value it can to the stakeholders that you are delivering it to. And the key players involved in that project management are, of course, going to be your project manager. And that's going to be the person who's responsible for making sure that the project proceeds within the set budget, timeframe, and it meets its objectives ultimately. I think it's also really important that you then consider the other stakeholders. So those are individuals or groups who are involved in or affected by the outcome of the project. And there can be a broad range of different stakeholders that might be affected by your project. It's obviously also important to recognise your project team who will be helping you within delivery, and they can be stakeholders or they can sit between being stakeholders and being part of that project delivery team and perhaps supporting the project manager. Also would be great for you guys to kind of provide some input now as to what you think kind of some examples of stakeholders would be for your kind of the projects that you might be looking to deliver. And again, if you can pop some answers in the chat, that'd be great. Yeah, exactly. Anybody who's affected by any projects that you're delivering, as well as, and that could include kind of patients, healthcare professionals or decision makers, researchers and scientists, definitely. And patient groups, 100%, and any collaborators, you're right, you might be collaborating with a vast number of different stakeholders. So it's important to kind of consider them when you're thinking about project delivery and project management. Volunteers are definitely ones. Thanks for all of those inputs in the chat. So as you've already kind of alluded to, we've got the stakeholders can come from a variety of different places, but Quite broadly, we can start with kind of external parties. So there's those are going to be stakeholders outside of your organisation. They could be agencies that you're collaborating with in order to support project delivery. And then there's also funders. They might be separate to your external party in terms of those are the people that might be financing a project. And then you've got your project team, so those people that you might be working with a bit more closely, or internally as such, so individuals who donate their time and skills to help your organisation. You've got your volunteers, and then you're also going to have any trustees, so any board members who are making decisions on behalf of the charities or patient groups. And then also you've got members of your community, so those people who are going to be affected by your project. And that can be any individual who's got some form of investment into your community and has an interest in that community, such as patients and loved ones. Great. So we're then going to move now into kind of what project life cycle looks like. And it's important to understand the extent to which you kind of perform project management descending on the kind of size of your project. It's not always going to be applicable to do every step of project management, but it's important to assess what's going to bring most value to your project delivery and where's your time is going to be most valuable to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. So I would suggest that kind of initial stages of scoping and initiation are going to be really important for any project that you're looking to deliver. So determining why you're doing it is going to be really important for then driving any decisions that you make throughout the course of your project. And so having kind of a document where you've written down exactly what the scope of your project is, the rationale and the objectives and goals for your project is going to be really helpful to refer to. But also if you're bringing anybody on board in future to support you in delivery, there's a document there that you can refer to and you've really thought about exactly what you're looking to achieve and what the objectives are of your project. Scoping we'll go into in a bit more detail later on, but it's also thinking about the size of your project. What's it realistic to achieve, and how big is it going to be? So yeah, definitely scoping and initiation are going to be really important for putting you on the best foot, putting your best foot forward in terms of project delivery. We've then got planning. So planning is going to be once you've kind of set out what your goals are and your rationale for completing a project, how are you going to go about achieving that? So creating a detailed project plan and creating timelines and the activities that you want to achieve within those timelines is going to be really important, as well as thinking about the costs and resources you have available to you and what's going to be achievable with those resources, and using those resources as effectively as possible is going to be, you're going to achieve that with your planning. Then most obviously is once you've done all your planning and you've thought about the rationale as to why you want to conduct the project that you are, is then the execution, which is obviously going to then lead to the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. And one point that's often kind of forgotten, I think, but is super important, is then monitoring while you're executing, making sure that your project is on track, that you are set to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for. And if you aren't on track, making sure that you're putting those steps in place in order to get the project back on track. And you might use kind of timelines and when you're looking to achieve certain parts of a project to indicate whether you're on track. There might be other metrics or key performance indicators that might indicate success. But also monitoring is going to help you recognize when you need to adjust plans, when something isn't working and something might need to change. As well as making sure that you're utilizing any budget or resources at the right rate. Have you burnt through your budget within kind of the first 5 weeks of a project and it's a 6-month project? That's not going to be feasible. So making sure, yeah, you adjust your plans as and when, as you're executing. And then finally, kind of your project completion and delivery. And again, something that's really important is then evaluating how it's gone. This might not be the only time that you complete this project. You might want to repeat it in the future. So making sure that you appraise how everything has gone is going to be really important to making sure that if you revisit a project, you can do it better the next time, and any efficiency savings and any improvements can be made off the back of that. Any questions about kind of project life cycle or anything we've discussed through today? Anything anyone would like me to explain in a bit more detail? No, all good. Okay. So moving on from kind of the project life cycle and the different steps, one of the things that you can utilize in order to help you go through the project life cycle is going to be a project management tool. Examples of project management tools are OneNote or Excel or Asana, Monday.com or Trello. I would suggest like any of these. It would be useful to interact with and work out what solution works best for you. And there's going to be a number of different things that you might consider when you're choosing a project management tool. So things like user fees, obviously you want to kind of reduce the amount of investment you might need to make into a project management tool. And it's really helpful to note here that Monday.com, which is something I've used at my day-to-day job at Costello, is free for registered charities. And this has a number of different functionalities within it and allows multiple people to kind of interact with a kind of project management dashboard, as it were, so that you can create timelines, you can upload documents, you can have chats about certain tasks and make sure people are accountable to delivering those tasks. Yeah, there's a number of different functionalities that I won't go into now, but definitely worth having a play around with it and seeing if it meets your needs. Also, other considerations when you're selecting a project management tool, so think about the ease of use. If you've got a number of different people who need to interact with this project management tool, you want to make sure that they're able to do so and it's not too complicated, because then you'll get disengagement and then people won't use it, and then that brings issues in with itself. Also the type of project, it might not be necessary to have a project management tool. Emails might be absolutely fine to achieve what you're looking to achieve. Don't use one for the sake of using one. There might be other options available to you that depending on the size of your project and how many people you're looking to communicate with. And as we just said, kind of available functionality. So can you share materials, schedule, make timelines and anything like that. And as I've said, already alluded to as well, if you need interaction from multiple stakeholders, think about how you're going to facilitate that, and a project management tool might be really, really useful for that. Cool. Any questions about project management tools? No? I did want to ask if anyone has used any project management tools before, and if yes, kind of which ones they found helpful. I would say Excel is also an excellent kind of project management tool for kind of storing data that you might need, creating timelines, any to-do list that you might need, but also obviously capturing any data that you might be capturing. So yeah, definitely a useful one. And it's just about selecting something that is going to work for you and what the project that you're looking to deliver. And I would definitely assess that using a different one depending on what that project is and what functionalities it can provide to you. Okay, so moving on, we're now going to kind of discuss project scoping and planning. As I alluded to before, I think project scoping is just such an important part of understanding where you're at and where you want to go, and how big you want your project to be, but also getting buy-in from different stakeholders. So before you kind of start a project, it's going to be really helpful to write down a project plan, and that's going to set out any objectives and goals that you will have for the project, as well as the outcomes and the deliverables and potentially the events that you want to deliver. As part of the scoping process, you're going to kind of want to make sure that the outcomes and objectives are going to be realistic with your resources and the time that you have available to you. And that might mean that you have to set some boundaries, and there might be some compromises as to what your project is looking to deliver. So that's generally what project scoping is. If we would all kind of run the biggest projects with the biggest impact, but it might not be feasible to do that. So it's thinking about what resources you have available to you, and that includes yourself and your time, but also the resources you have available from other people, and potentially the finances that you have available from funding bodies. And it's just making sure that you're using that time and those resources effectively to have the biggest impact that you can, but also being realistic. I've also popped on this slide as well, thinking about pilot projects. It might be that you don't want to do the full scale project to start off with because you're not sure what the impact and the benefit of the project is going to be. So running something on a smaller scale might be your first step. And so your project scope is going to be really small so that you can just assess what the impact is going to be before you might then go ahead and do it on a larger scale. And so as I've already kind of alluded to, setting your budget is going to be a really important part of project scoping and how far that budget is going to go, and thinking about where you're getting that budget, that funding from. Is that from external funders or donations? And as we kind of said before with the monitoring, once you've developed kind of a project plan, it can help you to kind of keep on track and ensure you're not expanding beyond the original scope and objectives that you set out to achieve. It might be that you're actively moving away from the objectives and goals that you set out to achieve, because as a project evolves, that might be the best thing that you need to do, and you're realizing that you're having an impact you didn't quite realize, and that's what you want to capitalize on. But it's also important to recognize when you're going off scope, off track from your project, and you're not going to then set out to kind of achieve the goals that you've written down at the start. I guess the next slide I wanted to go on to now is thinking about how you actually go about physically achieving project scoping. And this template on this slide hopefully presents that quite nicely. And to start off with, you obviously want to think about your rationale. So why are you conducting your project? What is the need, the problem, or the opportunity that you have found? You then want to define kind of the task, what task is going to look to address that need or the opportunity that you've identified. And then thinking about the purpose. So what will your project achieve, or what will it change as a result of delivering it? As we've already discussed as well, you're then going to think about your stakeholders. So who is your project sponsor? Who is accountable for that project? Who is going to be the project manager? So who's ultimately responsible for making sure that it's delivered? And then who is your end user going to be? This will all help to make sure that you're directing your efforts in the right way. And then also thinking about other stakeholders. Who else is involved or affected? You want to make sure that you get buy-in from the relevant people at the relevant time. So starting off by identifying those people is going to be really important to making sure you interact with people at the right time, you get opinions, and also that those people receive relevant information at the right times. And then last but not least, we've then got results. So thinking about the output. So what is going to be created as a result of your project, and what is going to be that success criteria? So, okay, you've achieved your result, but how will you measure the quality of that result? There's also thinking about kind of the outcome. So what will change as a result of delivery of your project? And again, what's the success criteria? How will you measure whether that change, that outcome has had the desired effect? So essentially, just to go back from over the top from the rationale, we're thinking about the whys, the drivers, the purpose, and the objectives of the project. Your stakeholders, who is going to be impacted by your project and who will be invested in the delivery of it and the outcomes associated with it. and then thinking about those results and how do you measure the impact of your results. So as an example, we just received this from Hannah and wanted to kind of give you something tangible to leave this training with today in terms of what project scoping might look like. So for this example, we've got rare disease patient groups often do not have trained experience in rare disease advocacy. So that's kind of the rationale, that's the why we're completing our project, and that's the opportunity that Beacon have identified. And the task associated with meeting that unmet need is running a year-long mentoring program that pairs rare disease patient group leaders with expert mentors. And the purpose of doing is that mentees are going to be better able to advocate for their rare diseases. Then thinking about the stakeholders, we've obviously, Hannah's going to be running this project. She's going to be the project manager and she's accountable to her manager. And then we're thinking about the end users, which is going to be patient group leaders, and then other stakeholders who might be affected by these activities. So the wider rare disease community, any mentors that they're working with, any patient groups, funders, or any project teams who are associated with delivery of this project. We've then got kind of the output is going to be the mentor-mentee pairings. And how do we measure the quality of our output is that we're going to have a survey at the end of our programme to ask how often the pairs actually met. Then another outcome is going to be that the mentees will be closer to achieving their advocacy goals. And the success criteria for that is going to be, have mentees set the goals at the beginning of the programme and have they achieved these at the end of the programme then through support of their mentors. Great. Then the next part of project scoping is obviously to think about kind of, there might be some challenges that you face with project scoping in terms of fitting the project scope within the resource you have available to you. And also just making sure that you're not setting unrealistic goals. Are you trying to do too much in one project? Would it be helpful to break the project down into separate components and deliver those separately to make sure that you're directing your time and resource in the right way? And then also, as part of this project scoping process, it doesn't have to be you alone completing this. Do think about whether you can get input from others as to what the scope of your project should be. So that might be interviews and focus groups, or planning workshops, or researching previously project experiences, but also really importantly, tapping into the rare disease patient group network. You're in a community, and the mentoring program is a great place to kind of draw on other people's experiences and see whether they have any experience from scoping a project like this or delivering a project like this, because that might help to inform your scope and may perhaps learn from their experiences as how best to tackle something. So lots of rare disease patient groups run kind of similar projects and have similar aims, and we should tap into this kind of network and ask for advice when running new projects. Especially if you're kind of new to the rare disease community, this mentoring program is going to be a great place to start. Interviews and focus groups might help to understand the needs of your community, and seeking feedback on that project scope is going to be really helpful for making sure that your rationale and objectives line up with what people actually want, and making sure you're kind of reaching out to stakeholders that will be affected by the project to make sure that you're kind of directing your energy in the right way, and so that you're most impactful with what you're delivering. I think planning workshops can also help to kind of bring the relevant stakeholders together and perhaps get buy-in from different people that you might not necessarily think would be invested in delivering your project, but also gain essentially additional perspectives that might highlight things that you hadn't thought about. That's the main part of this. I think the scoping stage is a real part to collaborate on and understand where you are and where you want to go, and seeking as many opinions at that point is really important and helpful. Any questions about the project scoping stage? No. Okay. So moving on, kind of now we've thought about what the scope of a project is, we then want to think about kind of what realistic timelines are for delivering that project. And so we've obviously have started with our project scope and determining what the overall project goal is and what those deliverables are going to look like. And then we want to think about breaking the project down. So you've got your final goals of what you want to achieve, but there'll be a number of tasks that will need to be completed in order to achieve that. And so it's about breaking it down into much smaller chunks and thinking about the time associated with delivering those smaller tasks. And you might have multiple different milestones to break that down into. You also, when you're thinking about the time associated with delivering a particular task, need to think about if there's anything that could affect the responsible party's time and thereby kind of delay task completion. But also consider kind of the external factors and stakeholders and how they might affect timelines. Is there a particular event that you want to run by a particular date because it's affected by an external factor? These are all things you might want to think about when putting together your timelines. And then establishing milestones. So what we mean by milestones is kind of a significant step as part of a project that you would want to achieve by a particular time. And if you don't achieve it by a particular time, that might become a bottleneck to then achieving other tasks. So it's really a good idea to establish what those milestones are going to be and the timelines associated with achieving those milestones, because this is going to be really important for then your monitoring aspect. So if you don't achieve a milestone by a particular time, then understanding why that is and then adjusting appropriately to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page and can adjust and change those project plans if required. I think a really important point to raise here as well is timelines are meant to be kind of a tool to help you in delivering your project. They're not supposed to stress you out. Putting them together might help to kind of map out when you're going to need to spend time on certain activities and when you'll need input from other people. So really important for your project planning, but definitely not something to stress you out. And be realistic about your kind of own capacity and other commitments that might then mean you may not be able to spend as much time on your project as perhaps you would like to. And as we say, kind of consider who else should be involved and plan around their availability. The more of a heads up that you can give people who you might need input from, the better. And if they can plan in advance, they can then set that time aside so that they can help you when the time comes. And then super importantly is to always build in buffer. Your project isn't going to go swimmingly and smoothly and perfectly from start to finish. There will be hiccups, there will be challenges that might come your way. So building in buffer into timelines, having contingency will make sure that you kind of stay on track more often than you veer off those timelines. And that's really important. And we do that with every project that we deliver at Costello. So one of the things that can be really helpful when putting together timelines is Gantt charts. And Gantt charts are essentially kind of a figure that help to kind of demonstrate when things will happen. This is just an example, and you can make a Gantt chart anywhere really. This is just a table in PowerPoint that's been coloured in, but you can see here that we've got project kickoff starting off in late March and then moving through the tasks all the way through to project delivery in August. So the start date and the duration of tasks are kind of reflected by the coloured in cells here, and you can use different colours perhaps to indicate different teams or different people or different individuals who are responsible for delivering a task. And the activity rows should be populated with the different steps and review times for developing your material. You can also have kind of a column that indicates who's responsible for each of the tasks, to make sure that everyone is held accountable and they know when their involvement is required within those timelines. We've obviously created a Gantt chart here in PowerPoint, but you can also create them in Excel, and lots of project management tools will facilitate making Gantt charts, like Asana and Monday.com. You can also just use a Word table and fill the cells in for the relevant months. This Gantt chart is broken down by months, but you can do it by weeks if that's preferable. And yeah, tasks can span multiple weeks, multiple months. And it's great to then helps you to visualize how tasks are happening alongside each other, and making sure you're not planning to start tasks that are contingent on another task being completed, and things like that. So it just really helps to kind of map out your project plans and when tasks are supposed to be completed. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about Gantt charts? All happy with that? Understood? Great. So then moving away from kind of once you've put together your project plans and tentatively put your timelines together, I would say timelines, don't stress too much about them. Have a rough idea of when you want to achieve things and map it out in a Gantt chart, but it might be that those plans change, and so you don't want to forever be updating your timelines or spending ages perfecting them only to change them 2 weeks later once something changes. So I'd say invest time in timelines, but know that they'll change, and so perfecting them each time might not be the best use of your time. So project kickoff and kind of preparations. I would think about, do you actually need a project kickoff? It depends on your project, the scope of your project, who you're going to be looking to work with, a number of different variables. But a project kickoff can be a really useful tool available to you to get all of your relevant stakeholders in the same place and discuss what you're looking to achieve. So successful project kickoff should kind of set those expectations. What are you looking for? How are you looking for everyone in that meeting to contribute to your project and its delivery? And make sure that you kind of have common goals and check-ins, as well as setting out kind of clear roles and responsibilities for those who will contribute to your project. Things that you might want to think about when you're doing a project kickoff is who the attendees are, the goals and the structure of the meeting. It might be that you've put together your project scope, you've outlined your rationale, your results and the different stakeholders, but you want to get feedback on that. So your project kickoff might be that you've put your project scope together, but you want to see what those stakeholders' opinions are on your project scope. So it might be much more of a discussion than a presentation, for example. You might also want to put together a meeting agenda so that people can review that ahead of a project kickoff to understand and have thoughts ahead of the meeting so that things aren't a surprise when they get there. And you also might use that opportunity of having everyone in the same room at a project kickoff to make sure you can ask questions and get different people's opinions. I would say project kickoffs is not having all of the answers about how you're looking to deliver your project. I think it's about getting everyone who's relevant to the project in the same room and gaining their perspectives and having the relevant conversations to kind of start the project and put your best foot forward. And I think the most important thing as well is establishing expectations of what you need from everyone in order to deliver that project. If expectations are clear, then it's going to be delivery is going to be much smoother. Cool. And then we've just got kind of different items that you might want to cover as part of a project kickoff. So firstly, you want to go through your scope and think about what the problem is that you're looking to address, why it's important to address that problem and the rationale behind performing the project in the first place. And then thinking about your project plan. So what you're aiming to achieve and the tasks associated with achieving that, what materials will be produced or delivered, and what input is required, and is this feasible? It might be at project kickoff you're working out with those stakeholders and those people who have resources available to them, what is going to be feasible. And then, as we've already discussed, away from the scoping stage is thinking about the timelines and what's going to be realistic. If you're dependent on another stakeholder for delivering something at a certain time, you might want to then, at that project kickoff, understand how that fits into the timelines. And is everyone aware and available to the timelines that you're suggesting? I think really important after a project kickoff is to then detail the next steps. After that meeting, what are you looking for everyone to go away and do to make sure that you can start the project and start ticking off those tasks that you've identified that need doing in order to deliver it. And then follow up as well is just thinking about having a written plan for people to refer back to. Sometimes people come away from calls and then they've forgotten exactly what was discussed and what was asked of them. So making sure that you have some form of minutes to hold people accountable to what you're asking them to do. Great. Got quite an open-ended question here, but also now we've kind of discussed the different elements of project scoping, the timelines that you might want to put together, and also the project kickoff. Can anybody think of any other points to consider when you're planning your project beyond kind of the rationale and the results and the stakeholders that we've discussed as well? Funding, definitely a really important point to consider. What resources do you have available to you, and how will that affect the scope of your project? Yeah, definitely engaging and sustaining participation, particularly with volunteers. So that's where your project kickoff is going to be really important, to kind of get their buy-in from the get-go, and make sure that everyone has clear expectations of what is being asked of them, so that you can sustain that engagement with those volunteers. Okay, great, we can move on then. So now you've kind of got you've done your project kickoff, everything's kind of started up and running. As I kind of alluded to during the project life cycle, we want to make sure that we're monitoring that project effectively, and making sure that those who are responsible and accountable for delivering different tasks, everything kind of stays on track. So monitoring should be conducted throughout the duration of your project. And you should think about, when you're putting your project plans together, how often you might want to kind of have those check-ins, how often you want to monitor progress with different tasks. So you definitely want to regularly observe kind of project performance, and ensure your role as a project manager is to make sure that people have the right guidance at the right time, and just keep nudging things so that they stay on course, so that you don't have kind of any fires that eventually occur that you might need to put out. The whole point of monitoring is to kind of prevent those fires, so that you can so that project delivery happens as smoothly as possible. So monitoring is going to be thinking about kind of where are we currently, so measuring the current project activities and review the work in progress. Is that where you expect it to be? How does that line up with any timelines you might have? And will that impact anybody else's work if tasks are contingent on each other? So where should we be? So making sure you looking at plans and your budgets, and thinking about how those two things stack up where you're expected to be. And is kind of progress and productivity meeting your expectations? If not, why not? And I think that's a really important kind of question to ask yourself, because it might be that if you're not where you expected to be, but the why not is kind of a good rationale for why you're not where you wanted to be, that's absolutely fine. There's no point in putting any unnecessary pressure on a situation, but it's just kind of identifying when of monitoring when projects aren't perhaps going on course, and whether you're happy with that or not, essentially, and if you need to adapt and put plans in place in order to make sure you get back on track. So as I've just kind of said, how can we get back on track? Identify and implement corrective actions where it's appropriate to do so. It might be also that if you're not on track, it's because the plan you've put together isn't quite working, and that's fine. It's just recognizing that as soon as possible, and making sure that you can put those kind of corrective actions in place. It might be that you're asking something of someone that they can't deliver on, and that's fine. It's then just adapting to that situation. And I would just say, yeah, don't put off dealing with problems, because then they might become bigger problems than they might have been otherwise. So definitely make sure to have kind of regular small catch-ups to make sure things stay on track, and understand how kind of everyone's getting on. As part of monitoring, it's going to be really important that you think about how you're communicating with your project team and the stakeholders that you're working with. And that's what we're going to cover in this next section. So as part of kind of communication, we can think about communication in two different ways in terms of internally. So those people who work as part of your organisation and your patient group, but also thinking about external communication, the other stakeholders outside of your organisation who might be that you might need to communicate with as part of your project delivery. So we thinking about internal communication is going to be so important that you have strong internal communication to kind of build trust among a team and keep everyone aligned on their respective responsibilities. And when you're communicating anything, I think it's really important to kind of put these three different kind of boxes / considerations into practice. So who should be involved in communication? It's making sure that that communication is targeted towards those who need the information. Sometimes if you provide too much information to people it's not relevant to, they'll become disengaged with that communication because they don't know what to take away from it. So I would always say, whenever you're sending something out, think about who you're sending it to, who should be involved, and why it's important that they receive that communication. Also want to consider kind of the medium that you're using to communicate with someone. Is it via email? Is that going to be the most effective way to deliver the information you're looking to? Or is it going to be better to have a face-to-face call, just so you can check in on things, and that will be quicker than writing an email that might take half an hour. And then also there's kind of those obvious kind of instant forms of communication in terms of Slack and Teams, but you also might want to use a project management software in terms of your method of communication. So if you're not expecting kind of an immediate response, project management softwares and tools can facilitate leaving comments on certain tasks, and that might be the way that you want to kind of facilitate communication amongst the team. Then you've obviously got your you want to think about kind of the frequency of your communication. If you set someone off on a task and that task is going to take a month, and you want to check in on them, you don't want to just check in with them at the end of that month and say, so how's it gone? Have you achieved what you set out to achieve? Because if they say no, then you could have had a month to kind of work them through that if they had any challenges, problems. Instead, you've kind of lost that month then if they then haven't completed that task. And that's when communication and frequent communication is going to come into play. So thinking about the frequency, is weekly going to be too frequent? Is actually fortnightly fine? Thinking about how often you need to check in so that you're nudging everyone in the right way. Planning will come into kind of that frequency of communication, and if something doesn't take very long, then you might not need to check in on them at all. And then checking milestones as well. As I said, those milestones are going to be kind of significant kind of tasks that are completed throughout the duration of a project. And you want to check in at significant milestones, because delivery of those milestones might affect different tasks. So you want to make sure you're communicating at those milestones to make sure everyone is on the same page. You might need to reset expectations, plans might have changed slightly. So checking in on those milestones is going to be really important to adjustments and that monitoring side of things. And then troubleshooting. So making sure you have open kind of communication streams if people are experiencing challenges or anything like that, making sure you've got that communication lines open to make sure you can support people is going to be really important for project delivery. I would also say just making sure that kind of communications are a good use of everyone's time. Don't kind of have meetings for the sake of having meetings, thinking about the agendas and what you're looking to cover within those. And just making sure your communication has a purpose. Too much communication can generate lots of noise and cause disengagement with projects. So I would say like communicating on a need to know basis can be applicable in a lot of instances. But that being said, it can sometimes be helpful for people to have wider knowledge about things that are going on, so that they might interact and engage with information that you do then send to them, which is unexpected, and that can support project delivery. So just making sure you're thinking about these 3 different kind of elements of communication when you're looking to deliver projects. Any questions about communication and what that will look like internally? No? All good? Great. So now we're going to go on to think about like working with other organisations, and that might be other agencies, charities, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare professionals, whomever that might be. And I think it's important when you're communicating with them to kind of understand that the priorities, goals and expectations of the interaction with that organisation, including kind of any deliverables you might be expecting them to provide to you, any materials they might already have that might facilitate kind of, or reduce the amount of communication that needs to happen, and what they want to use for a project. And if you're ever unsure, I think communicating with organisations outside, it's just to ask. If you're working with a new organisation that you haven't ever worked with before, it's a new interaction for them working with you as well. So don't be afraid to kind of ask those questions, make sure everyone is aligned on expectations, and that everyone understands what each other's priorities are and what the goals and objectives are. Really important as well, you will have communicated this internally with whoever is supporting you with your project, but to also communicate externally kind of what your timelines are, what your project plans are, and the expectations and deliverables are at the start of a project. So that's going to come into your project kickoff if you do conduct one. Has anyone got any examples of organisations they've worked with to kind of gain support with a particular project? Okay, great. Well, I think this is going to be very similar to kind of the internal communication side, but establishing external communication practices allows kind of both parties to be aligned on expectations. And I think you guys kind of alluded to that in the chat with the different kind of external people that you might work with. So again, thinking about who should be involved in communications, it's going to be really important, and the method of communication. Thinking about what you need to communicate, is that best in an email? Should that be done face to face? And then thinking about the frequency of communication. Are there certain milestones that you need to check in on? And what if you're working with an external organisation, you might have much less visibility about what is going on compared to those that you communicate with internally. So thinking about when you might want to schedule progress updates and schedule kind of calls or teleconferences to make sure you understand how things are moving on their end, so that you can then also provide the context of how things are moving on your end. Great. So kind of similar question to one that I asked you just now, but does anyone have any suggestions or guidance for considerations to make when collaborating with other organisations? Would be great to see any reflections on this in the chat. Thanks, Beacon. Definitely to be realistic with the goals and expectations that you have of an external organisation or individual, or anybody kind of just external to the people that you would usually work with within your patient organisation or group. Okay, well, thanks for coming back, guys. And I guess for the second part now, we're going to be, which I think we're kind of much past halfway now. But as I said before, we're going to be thinking about kind of any of the challenges that you guys might be facing, and you'll be much better to comment on those than I will be, but we'll do a quick discussion about that. And then thinking about a case study about working on your own and what how the project management processes might be impacted by that, and then thinking about project completion and what goes into that. We're going to have quite a few kind of discussions and breakout room opportunities, so please same kind of rules apply in terms of introducing yourself to people if you haven't already met them, and also kind of having a spokesperson to come back to the rest of the group so we can discuss these points in more detail. So without further ado, I'll go into kind of the challenges. And I guess with all the planning and the communication in the world and all the timelines that you put together, you're still going to face challenges during project delivery. And it's about thinking about strategies and different approaches that you can use to minimise the impact of these challenges on the success of your projects. And so on this slide, you just kind of put together a few potential roadblocks, and as we kind of had in our previous example, that could be maybe unexpected sickness that might delay timelines, or individuals are unable to work. We might have organizational structures that potentially present challenges to you, so thinking about how other organizations work and how the different structures might affect the way that they work. Are there any hoops that just generally need jumping through in order to get things done? Potentially contractual or compliance related reasonings, they could stand in your way. So it's about thinking about how you might anticipate those and overcome those. Budgets and loss of funding. Really important to think about that and how that might affect your project delivery, and can you kind of mitigate the impact of that through your project planning at the start. Bottlenecks, so just generally points of congestion in the workflow that might delay project delivery. Have you got so many things that you need to provide input on that you're delaying project progress because people are waiting for your input on things? And how can you mitigate the impact of bottlenecks? And similarly, are you reliant on other people for things that's causing bottlenecks? So that might happen when different tasks are contingent on each other. So it's making sure you can identify those situations and make sure that those bottlenecks are reduced as much as they possibly can be. Obviously, then you're as part of kind of your patient groups, you're going to be reliant on volunteers, and how reliable they are is going to kind of vary. And so it's setting out clear expectations, as we've kind of said, is going to be really important. They might not have that much time available to them, which might hinder project progress. And as we kind of said, making sure that we sustain that engagement with those volunteers. And when projects are difficult, we want to make sure that they remain engaged, and that we can get the best out of the volunteers and the time that they commit to patient groups. And then kind of linked to that volunteering is also the lack of engagement from stakeholders. And those stakeholders can, as we kind of discussed at the start, they can be a range of different stakeholders that you might interact with as part of project delivery. And it only takes one of those stakeholders to be disengaged to then affect project delivery. So it's thinking about how can you mitigate those and make sure that stakeholders are, the engagement with those stakeholders is maintained and we have effective communication. So we're going to move on to kind of another like small breakout room. And I think this is going to be hopefully a really kind of helpful discussion for you guys to reflect on any kind of challenges that you might have faced as a patient group or organisation, and think about tips and like how you handled and mitigated the impact of those challenges. And then we can kind of come back together. I'd say we'll probably go for kind of like 7-ish minutes to discuss this one, and then we can come back together and kind of discuss kind of what different challenges you guys might have been facing and how you overcame those. I popped a screenshot in the chat, I should say, whilst everyone was out on their break. So if you can download that, because I understand that when you go into the breakout rooms, you lose the main chat. So if you can, it's the purple box photo. Hopefully everyone can see that and can download it and open it. And then, yeah, hopefully you'll be able to then have those conversations.
Okay, I'll give people a couple of seconds to do that, and then I will send you off into your rooms. Cool. Great. Hopefully everyone had time. I probably should have asked if everyone had downloaded it, but I'm sure everyone had time to do them.
Yeah, so you 2 questions as well.
Yeah.
I think we're doing okay for time. How long do you want me to leave for you at the end, Hannah? Like 5 minutes, or is that?
Yeah, no, 5 minutes is plenty of time. Yeah, it's like kind of notices really, just like about some of the other trainings and some stuff I need them to be made aware of, so it won't take me very long at all.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we've got plenty of time to get through what we've got left and maybe finish slightly early.
Yeah, finishing early is always fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm never worried about finishing early. Finishing late, that's when I get a bit stressed, but finishing
yeah,
early.
no, I don't think we'll, wow. I don't think we'll do that.
In regards to the Phil breakout, when is that planned for?
That's just literally in a couple of slides time.
So in like maybe they've got, so in maybe like 15 minutes?
Yeah, probably.
I'm not sure if she'll have time to come in and do her bit.
No worries, we can definitely go on without.
Because that's like about a 10-minute breakout room as well, is it?
Yeah, we can even shorten it if we feel like that's a bit too long.
No, I think 10 minutes is a good amount of time in a breakout room, to be honest. Once people, it always takes people a while to like warm up, I think.
Yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, good to give them enough time to kind of like settle in and like get the discussion going. I always find that whenever I'm in a breakout room, like everyone's like starts talking when then the little thing comes up and it's like, oh, we've only got 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So whereabouts are you based, Olivia?
I'm in London. There's tube strikes today, so I'm working from home.
Oh, are there tube strikes? Whereabouts in London are you?
I'm in Clapham, so southwest London.
Nice. Yeah, lots of my friends live like Brixton, Peckham, Clapham kind of way, as I know a lot of people love Clapham.
Where are you based, Hannah?
Cambridge.
Cambridge. Okay, cool. Is that like the base of Beacon?
Yeah, it is. Like our offices are here, and most people come in at least once a week. There's a couple of us, like the projects team. Projects team are here pretty much every day, but we all live central Cambridge, so it's quite easy for us. Do you go into the office most days, or?
Yeah, I used to live in Cambridge when I first started at Costello.
Yeah.
Was there throughout lockdown. I think lockdown made me fall out of love with it though.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up here and then I left and then I ended up coming back because of COVID, and I like it a lot, but I'm also like, I never thought I would live here again. So like being here, I'm like, how has this happened? Phil's just going to type me some tips actually, so I can probably just say them, and then I can just be like, we've been through this, and this was what we learned, and then see if anyone has any reflections.
Great.
Where are the Costello offices in London?
They're just by Liverpool Street Station.
Oh, okay.
Literally by it. So yeah, it makes commuting between Cambridge and London easy for those people coming down. Yeah.
One of our colleagues used to worked at Costello and said that the London offices are like oversubscribed, or too busy or something. Like you might not even get a seat.
We're not quite there, but we're getting there. Yeah. It was a big decision for the company to kind of invest in office space during COVID, which is what had to happen, because everyone was kind of saying the office is dead because of lockdown and everyone working from home and everyone proving that they could do their jobs just as effectively from home. So yeah, it was a big decision from the company to buy office space or rent office space then. So
do you have a lot of flexibility? Like, can you work, or are you kind of expected to go into the office?
We can work from home 50% of the time.
Okay.
So yeah, whether that's like 3 or 2 days a week. You should be in 5 days over 2 weeks, basically.
Okay. Oh, that's at least you've still got flexibility.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I like it. I just like being in the office. I don't like.
Yeah, me too. I prefer it. I feel like it's nice to get to kind of separate home, and I like to be around people as well. I find I don't sometimes, depending what I'm doing, sometimes I'm more productive at home if I'm just doing like a big chunk of like writing or something, but as you like to be in the office.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay, they've got about a minute left until they'll come back into the rooms.
Perfect.
Hi guys.
thanks for coming back, everyone. Does anyone want to kick us off and kind of feedback what was discussed in your breakout room, both in terms of kind of any roadblocks you may have come across, but also kind of how you handled those?
Yeah, I was the note taker for our session again. So for ways to handle the roadblocks, we had Jeff said that they do weekly huddles with their team to see if any problems are arising week on week. Saying it depends very much on the situation of what the problem is to how to overcome it. Sometimes you can take a bit of a proactive action into seeing what problems may come up in the future and onboard people early on in the process to then help overcome those problems. Having a clear communications of your goals and objectives, and then linking that to when you do have a roadblock, what the clear priorities are of what to focus on.
Great, thanks so much, Will. That's really, really relevant points raised there. So I'm just writing them down so I make sure to kind of discuss them. Really nice to have like weekly huddles. That sounds like a really effective way of just getting everyone together, and yeah, a problem shared is a problem halved, I guess, as they say. And then you can draw on other people's relevant experiences. A problem that you might be facing, somebody else might have a really simple solution too. So yeah, communicating those and drawing on other people's perspectives is going to be really helpful for any challenges that anyone's facing. Really love the point around like proactive anticipation of any challenges. Sometimes could be quite difficult to anticipate those, but if you can and get out ahead of them and put mitigating steps in before they happen, that's going to be really, really useful and yeah, aid that successful project delivery. And as we've already kind of discussed a lot, thanks for raising that clear communication again. And we're going to talk a little bit in a second about prioritization. So it's really great that you've brought that up. So yeah, definitely thinking about what if there is a challenge and that means that you might have to deprioritize something, or something else is in a higher priority, making sure you've made the right decisions about what to prioritize. It's going to be really important there. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone's contributions there. And one of the things that kind of Will touched on earlier was thinking about prioritization, and that this is definitely a tool available to you as part of managing a project, and it's definitely something you should think about using. It's really important because, as we've just kind of discussed, your efforts can only go so far, and it's then thinking about what tasks that you can complete are going to have the biggest impact and are the most valuable use of your time, because you can only do so much and the teams that you're working in can only do so much. So thinking about prioritization based on the impact that and the importance of a particular task is going to be really important. There are a couple of methods here. We're not going to go into the kind of theories or ins and outs of what those methods are, but they might be useful tools to reference when thinking about what you should or shouldn't prioritize. Thinking about the urgency of a particular task, that might be really important in deciding when you prioritize it and the timelines that you're working to. So on the right hand side here, we've got urgent versus not urgent, and then thinking about also the importance of your task. If it's important and urgent, let's get it done. If it's not urgent but it's important, let's think about scheduling when we might complete that. If it's not important and it's not urgent, then get rid of it. Like, I think there's a lot to be said for having a to-do list that's so long and weighs so much on you. Actually, can you assess that to-do list and go, that's not urgent and it's not really important, can I just get rid of it? That's a really powerful tool available to you, and I would definitely, something that I do on a regular basis is to look down my to-do list and what am I carrying around that really just doesn't need to get done. If it's been on my to-do list for 6 months and it's never happened, it's probably because it doesn't need to happen. And then thinking about as well, if you can delegate anything, and that doesn't necessarily, I don't really like this diagram in the sense that it's saying that something's not important, but I think delegation is a tool that's definitely available to you, hopefully. And if you feel like you can't delegate, I would always ask the question why you can't delegate it, and can you remove those barriers that are preventing you from delegating something, if that's an option available to you. So there's also thinking about if a particular task is like a critical element that's necessary for you to succeed in delivering your project, versus is it kind of an essential element that might impact the project success, versus something that might be non-essential, or additional elements that might be eliminated, which I think is covered on the right hand side as well. Any questions about prioritization? Yeah, go for it.
It's not a question, it's just a comment about, delegation. It's also about letting go. Sometimes we don't trust other people, or, we feel that we have to do it. I mean, we have to ask that question. Do I have to do this task, or can someone else do it? And this is where delegation, it could become easier just by asking that question. Can someone else do it? Do I have to do it?
Yeah. And I think what plays into that as well is delegating in the right way as well. So it's all very well saying, okay, well, here's one sentence about what I'm delegating to you, and then no other context. That's going to be really difficult for someone to pick up. But delegation doesn't have to be that, but it also doesn't have to be loads and loads and loads of instructions and a step-by-step guide that ultimately takes longer for you to write down than it is to just do the task yourself. So it's finding that medium ground of like, how do you delegate and what does that look like, so that when you do let go, that still gets completed. Sophie, did you want to add to the delegation discussion?
Yeah, I popped a question in the chat. If you're a team of one, you've got no one to delegate to, what would you put in that box there? Because in my head, it's like put in pile. Which doesn't work, because that's not a proactive thing to do, but you end up with a pile of stuff that if you did have someone to delegate to, you'd be. So what would you put there if it wasn't put in pile or delegate?
Yeah, and I guess it's then assessing, like, because you're going to have a list of things, it's then assessing kind of where that fits within your priorities, and kind of if it needs to move up the list, then making sure that happens first before it happens to anything else. And if you've got, I guess I don't really have a solution, if you've got really high priority things that need to get completed, and you're the only person that can complete those, and you don't have any delegation options open to you, that's when that's going to be a really difficult situation to handle. But hopefully you can break it down into things that have to happen urgently and are high priority versus things that can happen on a longer time scale, and break it down into those different camps and work out what needs to be achieved. But I think you've just got to be realistic with yourself and just say, I can't do everything, and identify those things that are really, really necessary. I don't know whether that helps, but yeah, a tricky situation to be in, definitely. Jeff, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, the rare disease world is just full of those things. So, I have a huge list of things that I just periodically, maybe once a year, go back. Can I do it? Part of being here is basically going to that list and pulling something off of it, and hopefully this will lead to I guess really solving a problem that's been a long-standing problem that's urgent, but there's nothing I could do about it. So reevaluate. That's what I would say in the box periodically.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of letting go. It's okay to do that in the right scenarios, and letting go can sometimes be quite freeing and allow you to have the headspace to tackle other things as well. So yeah, definitely reevaluate those to-do lists and those things that you're looking to achieve, and really make sure that you're being realistic with yourself, and you're bringing the most value to what you're doing. If something isn't bringing value, then think about whether you can just get rid of it altogether, rather than holding on to tasks just because it's always been done that way. And I guess then thinking about kind of your ways of working as well. Is there any efficiency savings? Can something be done more effectively? Am I tackling this in the right way? Or can I reduce the time that this takes by investing a bit more now and coming up with a different system? Just thinking about those as well, and like short-term investment for long-term gains and things like that. Great. We're going to move on now to the final case study. And we're probably going to cut down the and this really relates to what Sophie was saying in terms of like working on your own essentially, and how you tackle that. So this is kind of brings together a lot of the things that we've been discussing over the last couple of hours, in terms of thinking about you're eager to like begin work on a project related to setting up a peer-to-peer support network for newly diagnosed patients, but you're quickly becoming overwhelmed as you don't have access to a project team. So I've listed some points for discussion there in terms of how do you get your project off the ground, who can you contact for support, and how do you effectively manage your time to deliver that project. How can you go about prioritizing tasks, and what can you kind of apply from today's learnings to this solo project. We'll probably reduce it down away from 10 minutes just so we've got a bit of time to discuss when everyone regroups. But yeah, if everyone could go away and discuss this for the next like 5 or so minutes, and then we'll come and regroup. I think we've touched on a lot of the answers just now with our discussions anyway. Welcome back, everyone. I think we'll keep discussions on this case study like a little bit shorter because I feel we probably covered a few of these elements already, but also very conscious of time, and want to make sure we wrap up things properly. Does one person from a breakout group want to kind of feedback about kind of all of these points of discussion?
I guess the project management tools that you were talking about earlier. So Monday, Excel, just making sure when you start off, you've got that base plan to follow, and can use that to make any adjustments a lot more easily. Yeah,
definitely. And I think having clear expectations about how you want, if you're working in a team, sorry, this is without a team, and making sure that you have set clear guidelines for yourself about how you want to use those, but also adapt if something's not working along the way, making sure you realize that and go, no, I need to use a different tool here because this isn't meeting the needs that I need it to.
I'm just saying, you know, if it's a solo, if you're doing this project solo, does it have to be your solo? Can it be somebody else's solo? We tend to kind of think we have to do this. We tend to think that we have to own this and all of this, but you know, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone got any final thoughts about this case study? Okay, great. We will wrap up then with a few final thoughts on kind of project completion. So once you've delivered your project, it's then thinking about how do you appraise that project and evaluate how it's gone. And what's really helpful is to also think about kind of go back to your original scope that you've written down and the plan, and that might help you to reflect and shed light on what went well and what could be improved. So thinking about your personal appraisal of project elements, so consider what processes worked well and were efficient versus any processes that should be changed for next time if you were going to do the project again. And having these things written down can sometimes be really helpful. You never know when you might need to revisit, or a material might be useful for someone else. To have those things, that's something that we do at Costello if we finish a large project. we will go back and we will reflect on how it went and make sure we write down exactly what our reflections are, so that if other project teams need to tackle a similar scenario, they can look at our learnings and we've noted them down properly. That's not going to be applicable in every case, but in some cases it can be really, really helpful to make sure that you have some form of notation of how you found that things went. And then thinking about team appraisals as well. All well and good if you're reflecting on how something's gone, but other people might have different perspectives on how efficient or effective that project, that task, or that element of project delivery was. So getting feedback from other people as well. And it might be that you want to think about this as a continuous process. It's not about waiting till the end. What if you can get feedback halfway through a project about how something is going? That might be helpful, especially if it's a repetitive process that you're going to be repeating as part of that project. Let's identify if there is any inefficiencies during the project rather than at the end when we can't do anything about it. And then also feedback from external parties and organisations in a similar light, and see kind of and make sure that any kind of changes to project approach that you might apply in the future are informed by their feedback as well. So I think we've kind of covered this in terms of like lessons learned. Can you alter your approaches based on feedback and make sure that future projects are more efficient and effective? And thinking about as well with your project scope, how did the resources that you thought you needed and the time and the budget, how did all of that stack up versus what you had predicted? And are there any learnings to take forward from that? And then also thinking about kind of assessing the impact of your project. So how can you assess whether you've achieved the outcomes and the effectiveness of achieving those outcomes? And thinking about surveys perhaps to understand the impact, or how much interaction you might have with materials or attendance at event, whatever it might be, and thinking about how you can actually measure the impact that you're having. And yeah, definitely like reflect back on your achievements and give yourself a pat on the back once you have kind of delivered that project. Recognition of everything that you've been able to achieve is really, really important at the end of a project. And yeah, taking forward those learnings for any future or also future projects, or also to share with this community. Great. I think that's everything that I have. I'm going to hand over to Hannah to kind of close out the session.
Thanks so much, Olivia. If you don't mind, stop your screen share so I can.
Yeah.
Okay, before I put my slides up, I'm going to share some links in the chat for everyone. I will explain what each of these links are, but I didn't want to have to contend with trying to screen share and work in the chat. I knew that would really confuse me. So they're there for your reference. Okay, so I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to Olivia and to the team at Costello Medical. Project management is a huge topic, but I think Olivia managed to deliver that session in a really concise summary of what is a massive topic. And I really hope that you all have had some really helpful takeaways that you can use going forward with your project, and also understand that lots of these concepts that we covered today can be scaled up and scaled back depending on the size of the team and the size of the project. So yeah, thank you to Olivia, and also thank you all of my mentees for coming today as well. It's really great to see you. Some quick Beacon plugs. Well, actually, this is the mentoring program plug. The last session in the training period is next week, next Thursday at 11 a.m. until 1. This is mental health and resilience training led by Rare Minds. So I hope to see you all at that. And I'm really excited about this for our official virtual welcome event. This is happening on the 30th of March from 1 till 3:30 in the afternoon. It is a requirement of the programme, so if you can't attend, please do let me know just by emailing me at hannah@rarebeacon.org. It's going to be a great event. You'll get the chance to hear all about Beacon, all about the scheme itself, but most importantly, you will get the chance to meet your mentor for the first time. So that's kind of what the whole program is about. So it's going to be a really great opportunity to get everyone in the room together. So that's not next week, the week after. And I know I spoke about this last week. I'm not sure, or the last session, I'm not sure if it was completely live, but it is live now, and that is one of the links. This is a really great resource. There's the recordings from the last training we had, the recordings from this training will all be on our resources hub, which you can access via that link. There's also a course, What's Next for Mentees, and that is another requirement of the program. It'd be really great if you guys can check that out before program launch on the 30th of March. And finally, another event. This one's not actually linked to the mentoring program. It's just one of our general workshops, but I think it will be really relevant to some of you. It's upcoming training, looking at how to register as a charity, basically. So if you are in those initial formalizing stages, this will be a really great workshop for you. And that's 27th to 29th of March. And yeah, that link is in the chat. And I will send all of these links out in the follow-up email as well. And thanks for tuning in. Yeah, it was great to see everyone. I think I put the feedback survey in the chat. I'm just going to double check in case I didn't. I
can't see it, Hannah, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah, training survey. That's the first link. So if you guys could please fill that in, let us know what you thought. That's really important for us. We really want to hit your feedback. And yeah, that's everything from me. Thanks again. And I look forward to seeing you at the next event. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. So bye, guys.